How can we take a serious look at magic? Or what if we live in a magical universe in a sense that's meaningful, not something that we can easily dismiss as New Age woo-woo nonsense, and yet at the same time, not something that we try to restrict with a materialist metaphysics that is just metaphysics. Scientists sometimes act like they have some special insight into the metaphysical nature of reality when our materialist views are just philosophical notions. They're just metaphysical notions. How could we understand magic in a serious way? Do we have some evidence that magic might exist in the world? One of the places we can look is in the work of the poet William Butler Yeats, who was quite interested in magic. And Yates gives us 3 principles of magic that are really extraordinary because of how they fit with available science. And the science really wasn't quite as available in Yates's time. There were some things in his time that would have seemed a bit magical, but there are things now in our view of the nature of mind that seem to validate his vision of the meaning of magic. Now here's what Yates wrote. He wrote, "I believe in the practice and philosophy of what we have agreed to call magic, in what I must call the evocation of spirits, though I do not know what they are, in the power of creating magical illusions, in the visions of truth, in the depths of the mind when the eyes are closed. And I believe in 3 doctrines, which have, as I think, been handed down from early times, and been the foundations of nearly all magical practices. These doctrines are, 1, that the borders of our mind are ever shifting, and that many minds can flow into one another, as it were, and create or reveal a single mind, a single energy. 2, that the borders of our memories are as shifting, and that our memories are a part of one great memory, the memory of nature herself. 3, that this great mind and great memory can be evoked by symbols. I often think I would put this belief in magic from me if I could, for I have come to see or to imagine in men and women, in houses, in handicrafts, in nearly all sights and sounds, a certain evil, a certain ugliness that comes from the slow perishing through the centuries of a quality of mind that made this belief and its evidences common over the world." Now that's William Butler Yeats, and it's really a beautiful passage. It's wonderful how he succinctly states these 3 principles of magic, and then I really love the end, where he says, I wish I could get rid of this belief. Because when I recognize the truth that there is real magic in the world, I also recognize that we've degraded it, and that we've lost a certain quality of mind that made the evidence of magic common, that we could see the evidence. We didn't have to have an act of faith, but we could directly live in a magical world. And depending on your experience, you may or may not recognize this startling fact about what Yeats wrote, namely that we have scientific views that resonate with these 3 principles of magic. They coincide with principles of modern cognitive science and neuroscience, and we're talking about serious work done in the past few decades. And again, a lot of it much after Yeats wrote this passage. And so, although we might feel some skepticism about magic, and we might at first dismiss the principles that Yeats uses to define magic because, well, he's talking about magic, right? So it's got to be nonsense. Well, it turns out that these same principles are recognized as part of serious scientific work on the nature of mind and the nature of life. Now, given that magic has something essential to do with mind, that aspect might not surprise Yeats. You know, he might have say, if we could bring him here today and say, well, look, what you outlined has a lot of resonance with cognitive science. He might say, well, of course, if cognitive science is seriously studying the mind, then it's going to find its way to magic. So maybe he wouldn't be surprised, but surely many of our more narrow-minded scientists and intellectuals and even fellow citizens would be quite surprised and might feel a little defensive. The metaphysical police might put on their riot gear if they hear about this supposed convergence of science and magic. But take a look at some of the work out there, work of serious thinkers and also rigorous researchers, people like Francisco Varela, Ezekiel de Paulo, Gregory Bateson, Eleanor Roche, Carl Jung, Wolfgang Pauli, James McConnell, David Bohm, Dean Radin. And there are many others who give us a way to think rigorously and scientifically and empirically about the principles Yeats offers and to see them as aspects of nature, not aspects of some fantasy notion, but aspects of the world we live in. And you can look up work on things like extended cognition. That's one realm where you'll see research on this. Inactive cognition. And lots of work on what we now refer to as the anomalous. And what we find are rigorous definitions of mind that describe mind as non-local and relational. And that means that mind is not restricted to the skull or the bag of skin. Obviously, magic is impossible if you are stuck inside of a bag of skin and you can't reach out. That's it. It's just a mechanistic world and you're trapped in there. Then magic seems very impossible. But everything, if it's relational and interwoven, if we live in a cosmos that is relationality all the way down and interwovenness totally, radically, then magic becomes not so crazy. And there are serious scientists who would say that we can't. They would even say you can't really have a good theory of mind if you see it as contained and restricted to the brain. They would say, of course, most of these scientists are themselves still pretty materialistic, and they would say the brain is crucial. They wouldn't deny that. But they wouldn't say that you could have a good theory of mind if you try to restrict it to the brain. And we, again, have so much evidence that the mind is relational and that it then therefore naturally defies the narrow metaphysics that the dominant culture tries to indoctrinate us with. That mind can give rise to anomalous experiences that just don't fit the paradigms that tend to constrain our vision of life. And so in a general way, contemporary scientists have endorsed theories and validated findings, and I mean validated with hard data, that fall well within the framework Yeats defines for magic. And we need headlines and memes about this. It's nothing short of astonishing once we go into it and let it get into us. And the dominant culture has done a poor job at incorporating the shift from classical to non-local physics, classical to non-local psychology, classical to non-local cognitive science, and classical to nonlinear mathematics. Even so, our science has validated this shift, and we have more shifting yet to come. And we should probably emphasize that last point, more shifting yet to come. When we enter the world of magic, trying to look at it seriously, not just what we wish, not just being impulsive or irrational or goofy about it, but really think about it seriously. we have to avoid the temptation to come up with a mechanism that accounts for these principles and their functioning. It's not to say we'll never have an understanding of one, maybe we will, but the primary thing has to do with our philosophical vision. And we have to recognize that the dominant culture and its science, what we refer to as science in the dominant culture, which is not the only manifestation of something scientific, but this iteration of science, what we call science in the dominant culture, it may have no good explanation for some or maybe even any of the kinds of experiences of magic that we could verify for ourselves in experience. So we could experience something that has no explanation, and that's okay. And given their philosophical and spiritual significance, which means also their ecological, cultural, and cosmological significance, we should do something to verify these experiences. Not merely argue about them or try to come up with a mechanism that explains them or try to come up with a mechanism that somehow explains them away. Try to resist that elegance theorizing on the basis of a limited and limiting worldview, which itself seems overdue for a paradigm shift. So we don't have to go into all of that. We first could just begin to enter into the mystery and verify the experiences. But before we do that, we have to begin with an ethical orientation to life and situate ourselves in a philosophy of life rooted in wisdom, love, and beauty. Because if magic doesn't attune us with wisdom, love, and beauty, it will only create problems. On the other hand, if magic does attune us with wisdom, love, and beauty, it may create new possibilities for us, new possibilities for insight and healing and wonder, new ways forward that we very much need right now.